Hello, everybody. This is Mo with Unsung Gridiron Legends. Check out the Facebook page, the Facebook group. Today, we are lucky to have a special guest with us, All-State legend from McDowell High School and legend from UConn University, Mr. Laban Marsh. How you doing, Laban?
Good, Mo.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, man. We really appreciate you doing this today.
Yeah,
man.
my pleasure. Happy to do it.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. So I want you to think back to the mid to late 90s.
All right.
Okay. I'm a recruiter. I'm bringing Laban Marsh into my team. In the mid to late 90s, what am I getting when I bring you in?
Man, that's a really good question. And I'll tell you, I had some superstar guys around me. Like our quarterback was Brian Caldwell. And so for me, and I think it's very important on any team, I'm in business with family,
Right.
understanding your role.
Okay.
And for me, it wasn't so much about the chatter, it was putting in that hard work.
Right.
Especially outside of Friday night. You know, everybody loves the Friday night lights, but what are you doing when no one else is watching?
Right.
And I think that's where I really took pride in my work ethic, the level of tenacity. Like Tommy Palmer, who was a great local legend himself, played at Merciers. He was, and I played D1 football, he was pound for pound the hardest hitter. And so he would always pick me as a defensive partner on tackling drills,
Right,
and I
right.
knew if I didn't bring it, he was going to run right through me.
Right.
And so when I think about what my role was, especially on McDowell with such a great group of guys, hard-working, competitive, it was that I was that role player. Like, do you need me on special teams? Do you
Right.
need me where on offense? You know, because I played wide receiver as a junior,
Right.
running back as a senior, and then a defensive back. You know, through the years. So
Right.
I think just being a role player and just regardless of where we need you, if I put you in, you will, you know, do what we tell you and
Right.
and be just.
So give
like
a guy
your
a
hair's on fire.
high level no matter where we put you at.
Exactly, and I think that's where the focus just being whatever's best for the team.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean? Because
right.
in the game of football, you got to know your assignments and you got to just mind your own business, do what you got to do, trusting that your teammate is going to do his role.
Right.
So I'd like to think I was just that role guy where you know, like a Swiss Army knife.
Right.
It would probably
Great
best
analogy.
describe
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I like to do and what I took pride in. You know, getting on. You know, when I still step on in between those lines, I got to put at least a jog to it.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, it's just something where
Exactly.
you can't get away
Exactly.
from some of that stuff, that foundational
Right.
work ethic. So
Right.
that's what I'd like to think of myself as a utility player.
Right. So for those who don't know you, can you tell me like where you grew up at, city, state, maybe a little bit about the neighborhood you grew up in?
Yeah, sure. Again, a great question because although we graduated from McDowell High School, we grew up in Corey, Pennsylvania,
okay.
the second biggest city in Erie County, right? The only other city. But just down in 440 South Street was a house that my great-grandfather built, and so we were in between Concord Elementary School and the high school,
Right.
and so we rode our bikes everywhere. But it was the other thing, and you have siblings, like when my brother went out to play, my mom's like, you're taking Laban with you.
Right,
So
right.
I always had the chance, backyard football, pick up games of hoops.
Right.
My brother had to take me with him, and so you know when you compete and play with the older kids, it makes you a little bit better.
Right.
So yeah, we were fortunate. We grew up in Corey. We actually have a real estate office down there because we knew it was important, and I had a coach that once told me as we were getting ready to move to Mill Creek in '92, we had a guy from Corey that just said, hey, remember your roots. And that was really
Right.
important. And even as we kind of spread out, all four of us boys do live in Erie, but it's still important for us to be in
Where
Corey,
we came
serve
from.
Corey, and cheer for Corey.
Right,
Because
right,
it is
right.
a great town. It did a lot for us, you know, on that foundational level.
Right.
So, and then we moved to Mill Creek when I was 13 and in 8th grade.
Okay.
So that's where it started. Was back in down
Corey,
in little
PA,
Corey, PA, just a
Wow.
little town. But my parents both grew up there. My grandparents were living there, and so for the time in that late '80s, early '90s,
Right.
it was a great town for us to grow up in.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about your family a little bit. Did you grow up with both parents? Any siblings?
Yeah, so both of my parents were very much encouraging, especially in athletics.
Okay.
They had 4 boys, and now, again, you talk 90s, my parents' name were Greg and Marcia, and they had 4 boys, like
Right.
the Brady Bunch. And it was Lucas, Laban, Levi, and Lamech. My father was a youth pastor, so we grew up in the church. And
Okay.
in fact, when we lived in Corey, we attended First Alliance Church up here in Mill Creek, and my father was the youth pastor.
Okay.
And so on Sundays, we would drive up for church in the morning, and then we had the church to ourselves all afternoon until evening service.
Right.
So we would watch Sunday, football on the
Right.
TV. We rolled in things, but we would always just be competing, playing in the gym. So it was important for my parents, for the 4 of us boys to be pretty tight. And I had this conversation recently. My wife grew up in upstate New York with 2 sisters, and they all had their own bedroom. Well, when we lived in Corey, it was a 2-bedroom house. My dad finished the upstairs of this little 2-story home,
Right.
and all 4 of us boys shared the same bedroom. So, I think that was pivotal in again, that foundation of closeness and
Right.
that competitiveness.
Right.
You clear out the beds and play football.
Oh, yeah.
I think the importance of family and the support system and the encouragement, and I coach kids now, and you coach kids. So a lot of these parents are really hard on their kids. And my parents were tough on us. They showed us the love of God, but then also the discipline.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And the fear of God, if you will. So it was just something where so pivotal, but primarily for their encouragement and their support. And still to this day, like after this interview, we have Sunday night dinner at my parents'.
Right.
Every night. We've done it for 20 years.
Wow.
If you can make it, great. If not,
Right, but it's
we
there.
understand you're busy. But so even though we're in business together, we've always really leaned on family. And we like to think in our business, we've expanded that family to our agents and then the kids we
Right,
coach. You
right.
want to make everybody feel like family. So
Right.
pivotal.
So youth sports, did you play a lot of organized youth sports?
Yeah, and because I had an older brother, Lucas is 3 years older than me, so whatever he got into, it's like I got to get into.
Right.
So, and in Corey, we wrestle. They always kind of like Fort LaBeouf now. They're wrestling schools, so that's how we started. They had Corey Kids Wrestling, great little feeder program that all of us did. And then Lucas got into basketball.
Okay.
And so even in elementary school, so then my only athletic regret was not continuing to wrestle because I wanted to be like Lucas playing hoops. And I loved hoops, but wrestling, I think, was really good for me, and I enjoyed that thoroughly. So, I played a lot of sports. And then, Pop Warner down in Corey, it was just a Corey Rec League.
Okay.
And so, that was a great foundation for me to be competitive and organized. And so, I tried just about everything as a kid.
Right. So you go to McDowell, you end up moving into Mill Creek, right?
Yep.
And you helped them go to the Western Finals twice.
Yeah,
Right.
I was a small part of that. I think, again, they had been building and building. Coach Ruler had come in after Coach Sanford and knew that he had a lot of talent. And so when I was a sophomore, you could see the class above us, Choco, a lot of these guys that really were forming a great nucleus of just togetherness. I think is so vital. And so my junior year, when we went 12-2, we finished against Penn Hills. Right. Ron Graham, who I ended up playing with in the Big 3. These guys, Victor Strader's another guy I played with. So that was really big going into my senior year because we knew what the guys ahead of us, how talented they were, and how close they came. And then, like I said, I had mentioned Brian Caldwell, who was such an incredible athlete. He played basketball. He was just great. But he was tall, big, could move. So to have him and the expectations, it was big, and we wanted to follow up with that. So our senior year, and again, great leadership. John Cashone, I know you interviewed him as well. We just had such a great coaching staff, and it was guys that didn't just feel entitled that we were going to win. They saw the work that it took to get there. And so 13-1 my senior year, and I'll tell you what, and I know you know Jerry Mifsud.
Yeah.
I still give credit to Pat Mifsud, who was a defensive back.
Right.
He actually made a touchdown saving pass breakup in the end zone against Central.
Right.
And that saved our undefeated season. I, to this day, give him credit for that individual play, and it's all team. But had he not made that play, Central probably would have beat us, and that changes.
Was that D10 or the regular season?
No, that was regular season. Yeah,
okay.
and I think we did play him again in D10.
Okay.
And now we're creeping into some of these memories after being concussed a number of times. It's hard to keep it straight, but I remember it being a pivotal play. And then again, getting all the way to those Western Finals where Woodland Hills, and this is before Gronk got there.
Right.
Medee Williams, who played quarterback at Syracuse, Delrico Fletcher was a wide receiver that played at Rutgers, and they beat us down at Sharon, which left us 13-1, 25-3 over our junior and senior year. Which, 2 Western Finals. It just is so bittersweet because you know how hard it is to get there.
Right.
But to get to that state title game, and you probably had to face a Central Bucks or something,
Right.
big powerhouse.
Right.
But huge accomplishment, and again, it was just so fun to do it with guys that had been working so hard from our freshman, sophomore years to starting to see it come to fruition. And I think, again, even the year, I went to UConn, Jeff Heil, who ended up kicking at UConn with us, he went to 3 straight Western Finals. Yeah, so he was a part of that. And again, I think that's where when you start to talk about the legacy, it's a lot like in business. That first generation puts in that work. The second generation usually witnesses it. But by the third generation, they just think, hey, we win. And they stop putting in that work. And I'm not saying that's what McDowell did, but once you get into that complacency, it gets really tough to stay on top. And I think that's one of the challenges anymore of athletics is how do you stay on top even through those, solid classes of kids where you might lose 8, 9 seniors, but there's always somebody to step up.
Right.
And I think that is the best part to me about sports because I was that kid. Like at UConn my freshman year, our captain, Clint Hamilton, went down with a concussion. I came in at Delaware. I made an interception right before the first half. But you have to be able to step in and step up. And that's what I loved about football. And, backup quarterback's probably one of the best positions in football. But guess what? If that starter goes down, this is why we're paying you. So step up. And I think the guys that really take the opportunity to step in on opportunities, it can change the whole trajectory of what you're doing. I was fortunate to have a number of opportunities where that door opens, you better step through and make something happen.
Right. So if you had to look back at those McDowell 3 years, or what made those to you? If you had to put a couple things, what made those teams special? That run you guys had.
I think the competitiveness internally. And that cohesion, they talk about the glue, who is the glue, and I think just everybody knowing they were putting it on the line and nobody wanted to be the reason we lost. And so I think there's something about that competitiveness within a team, and it's not an envy or, I don't want to see him shine. I think that was even for me when I talk about my role, like BC was D1 rated, I wasn't getting talked about per se, but I knew, hey, if they're showing up to watch BC, if I show out, then you can get right. I mean, so I think it's how you look at opportunities too. But there's no doubt that cohesion and that knowing your role, if you will. And again, it's like you don't have to talk about it; just be about it. People, the coach will recognize, and I tell my kids now, just keep working. And when you have the opportunity, don't blame, not performing on not getting a chance before. This is your chance. So make the most of it. So I think that's where, and for instance, we had a couple guys that were suspended for a playoff game down at Shenley. And so Ronaldo Batista stepped up and had the game of his life because we needed somebody to fill that role. And it was a team that just, again, what do I need to do, coach? And so I think that does start at the top. Ronnie Rudler, John Cashone, Tom Delfrat. I mean, we just had some great coaches. And Paul Yocklin was our running back coach. I did not, I think the proudest stat I had is that I never fumbled my senior years of running back. I fumbled one time, I recovered it myself. Just to get the stats accurate.
Big turnover,
But I mean, part of that was I didn't want to let Coach Yocklin down. And I think that's where, for kids these days, so many kids do it for themselves. But when I think about performing, it's like who's got my back, that has worked so hard to support me in doing this. It's my time to shine.
Right.
What are you going to do with it?
Right.
And I think, because again, don't make excuses.
Right.
I do not want to hear excuses.
Right.
And I think there again, like we as a team didn't make excuses. We just said next man up.
Mm-hmm.
So the cohesion, the work ethic, and then I think just the trust in the coaches and your teammates. So there's a lot to be said for trust, in a team environment.
Right. So you go on to be first team All-State in football your senior year in football, but you also you were a great track athlete. Talk about your track accomplishments.
Yeah, so in track and field, and again, I give credit to Coach Joe Sanford for pulling me in, and of course we all know about track. You watch it on the Olympics, but I didn't know how fast I was. And football speed and track speed are different.
Mm-hmm.
But because Coach Sanford was a football coach, that I still think he coaches freshman football to recruit pole vaulters. Like, who are the guys that are strong and fast?
Who can do it?
So he pulled me. Actually, we were at the Hammermill Center watching Lucas play basketball for McDowell, and Coach Sanford said, "Hey, come here and sit down." I'm like, "What's up, Coach?" As an 8th grader, he says, "Hey, you guys live close to MIHS now, and we practice every night. Why don't you just get off the bus from Westlake and just walk down and start practicing?" So as an 8th grader, he invited me down to pole vault. And the pole vault is the most challenging event, without a doubt, in track and field. I mean, technically speaking and everything else. And then you got to have a screw loose, right? Anybody that tells me they pole vault, I know, okay, they got something wrong with them, which I like it. Plus, you're assertive, because no pole vaulters, mom or dad says, "Hey, I'd like you to pole vault." Like, you have to want to do
You got to
this.
want to do that yourself.
Yeah, so having, again, arguably one of the best coaches in the country in Joe Sanford, who was always learning. He's still coaching and he's still learning and teaching. Again, that encouragement, and then the technical side to keep me on task. I was able to get, that you talk about 10,000 hours and you work on something and you're going to get better. And so he created that opportunity. And even though I played basketball up to my sophomore year, the part of the reason I talked to Coach Flynn, who I know you've interviewed, great coach, I just said, "Hey, I want to focus on indoor track and the pole vault, because I think I can do all right."
Right.
And so that was where making those hard decisions, and I love multi-sport athletes, but I understand, really focusing. I just think you should do that a little bit later. So that was my junior year. I ran indoor track. I ended up, by my senior year, being an All-American pole vaulter. I went to nationals my junior and senior year. And it really came down to where, like, even when I was recruited, UNC Chapel Hill recruited me for both football and track, but neither wanted me to do both. And so, and it feels audacious to even think that I was looking at Division I schools both for football and track. And it was Coach Sanford who also came in and said, "Listen, if you need the financial support to get there, track and field is going to be really tough. You can pole vault, but for 10 points," and I didn't really realize I was a sprinter at that time. You're just not going to get the money. You're going to want to focus on football. And so that was where, when UConn started recruiting me, and it was Skip Holtz. I mean, he just came from Notre Dame. Everybody knows his father, Lou Holtz. And so my question, again, it seems audacious thinking back on it, but they offered a football scholarship, and I still asked, "Well, can I run track?" I don't know how many football scholarship guys ask if they can play another sport, especially at that level. And Skip's big thing was, will you perform? Like, are you going to make a difference on the team? And so that was where track and field, as early as 8th grade with Coach Sanford, getting me into the pole vault, and then staying with me, working in the summer, all that. And then it wasn't until my senior year in the sprints, I went down to the Butler Invitational, which was one of the first outdoor track meets. And I had just they released the Big 33 list. Now, I actually was not on the original list, but William Peterson, who's from Laurel Highlands, played at Michigan, and I have a funny story about that. He dropped out because he hurt his ankle, which I found out during track season, and so I was an alternate. And Ron Rudler happened to be a coach that year because we had gone to 2 Western Finals. And so I was invited to play in the Big 33 as an alternate. And so now I'm in, and it's track season. And we're at the Butler Invitational. When you see LeVar, and he's got his, tattoo of the Nittany Lion on his bicep, he's just been named Player of the Year. And so I walk up to him, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Laban Marsh. I'm going to play in the Big 33 with you." And he's kind of like, "Well, everybody's coming up to me. Do you want an autograph?" And then we end up running, and he finished second, and I won. And as we stand there, he's like 6'5". So I'm on the podium at number 1. He's at number 2, still taller than me. And so he looks over and he says, all right, you're big 33 material. And so for me and for any kid, when you have the player of the year saying, all right, now
you're legit, right.
And then we go down to the Baldwin Invitational, and that's where I ran into William Peterson. And this dude is yoked. So when I run into him, I just said, hey, I appreciate you stepping out, but can you tell me why you're not playing? He's like, I hurt my ankle at the end of the season. And he's like, I really want to get a chance to start at Michigan. You want to go to Michigan as a freshman in 1997? So I'm like, okay, we run. Again, I beat LeVar first and second in the Baldwin Invitational. And then I get to college at UConn. The very first opening day, we have a night game. So I'm watching TV in the hotel, and Michigan's on TV. And I hear, that's Peterson's second interception of the game. So William Peterson, who stepped out of the Big 33, and I filled in for him, not only ended up starting for Michigan, they won a Rose Bowl, and he was opposite of Charles Woodson.
Wow.
So
as a true freshman.
As a true freshman. So, I mean, like, it is crazy when you talk to different athletes and hear their story. I mean, if not for William Peterson stepping down because he thought he could start at Michigan, Laban Marsh is not playing in the Big 33, where I got to play with Brett Veach, who's the general manager of the Chiefs now.
Okay.
And James Mungro. I just was up at Syracuse yesterday for the UConn game. James Mungro played at Syracuse. And then next to him was Coy Wire, who our kids in high school, they brought back because they watched that CNN 10.
Right.
And I'm like, I played with that guy. That's Coy Wire. He went to Stanford. And so to make the all-state list, even though I think I was a return specialist is how I got all-state. But then you look back at that all-state list, and a lot of those guys were in the Big 33. And Coach Frudler's most famous story about the Big 33 was, we'd take a bus to the field every day to practice. And I would just sit there quietly, usually with Brett Veach, on the drive over, and they're all talking about speed and who's the fastest, and everybody's saying this and that. And so all of a sudden LeVar says, hold up. The fastest kid on this bus is that white dude right there. Because I had beat, and I finished second in the 100 that year at Shippensburg. But I wasn't going to say anything, but again, it's the same thing. Like when he points it out, people start to listen to it. Right. So track and field was vital to me. That's why I always encourage kids to be multi-sport athletes, even though football did so much for me, open doors.
Right.
It was really the track and field. And the last time I was at Syracuse in 2001, we were in the Big East. I got to run against Willis McGahee and Philip Buchanan and Santana Moss and Andre Johnson and Darryl Jones and all these guys that years later are all pro. Andre Johnson's in the Hall of Fame. Right. So to run them in a foot race in track and field that never would have had a chance to compete against them in football. But that is why I try to encourage kids to be multi-sport athletes, because there are so many new opportunities that you might be missing out on. That really, it just was so huge to look back on and reflect on and know that all that hard work, can pay off.
Right. So what was recruiting like for a lot of schools looking at you when you come out of high school?
That's another great question because I didn't know the process. My brother Lucas went to Geneva College where he played basketball. And, at the time in the 90s, it's like you got to put your own film together, send it out, do the recruiting.
Right.
And so because I ran track and thought that's what I wanted to do, and then after Coach Sanford saying, hey, football is going to be your route. So I was getting recruited by a couple different schools. I had gone during my senior year. I went on an unofficial visit to Kentucky because we had a bye week.
Okay.
And my uncle went to school down in Kentucky, so he took me down. And now this is where I was going to play receiver. Actually, UConn was one of the only schools that recruited me as a DB. So I was going to go down to Kentucky, and at the time, Tim Couch was the redshirt quarterback.
Okay.
So it's like Bill Curry was recruiting me, but between the time I scheduled the unofficial visit and went down, Curry had been fired. And they were bringing in Hal Mummy from down south in Georgia. So Kentucky kind of took me off their list with a new head coach, but there was a coach out of Newcastle that had just gotten up to UConn that had been recruiting me really hard, and his big pitch was, you might be able to play here as a true freshman.
Right.
And you hear all those stories about redshirt, and I just wanted to play.
Right.
And I didn't even care necessarily what level, but I knew they were 1A, 1AA at the time, and they were going 1A without a doubt. And so I think to see that opportunity, and they had a good track team. They were in the Big East. And so the recruiting process for me was that unofficial visit to Kentucky. And then right at the end of the season, UConn asked me up for the official visit, which I went on my own. My parents didn't come up. And Skip sits down on that last day and either offers you or doesn't. And so they offered me a full scholarship on that trip. I told them I wanted to go home, talk to my parents, and pray about it a little bit. Right. And then I was thrilled to accept it without even really knowing if track was going to be a part of that picture. Right. Right. And this is the other thing I tell kids. So that was my senior year right after the football season. And I'm a pole vaulter, right? And I had jumped, I think, 15 feet the year before, finished second in the state. But no college coach was saying, hey, we don't want you to run track. Like, they actually were thrilled that after that football season and committing to a full scholarship, they ended up winning, and setting the state record in the pole vault and then finishing second in the 100. They like to see athletes, and they like to see athletes compete. And so even if you're on a scholarship, because I hear both guys and girls saying, well, I don't want to get hurt, or I don't want to, it's like, man, take the opportunity to do as much as you can and contribute, to your classmates and your team. Yeah, but that was the only visit. I think you get 4 or 5. I took one visit to UConn, loved the campus, loved everything about it, knew I might have a chance to play and then build into a 1A program. And so, I don't wish I went on any other visits. So yeah, it was like a sniper, one shot, one kill. They did it right up at UConn. Yeah.
So you had a really good freshman year, actually, right, when you went there.
And I think because in that preseason, it's a lot about personnel, like what are the needs of the team, and now you've got the portal and all this other stuff. But I knew that if I worked hard enough, I might get a chance just based on numbers. And as much as I could play corner, nickel, or safety, it was when our free safety went down, and that's where I had been playing. I played in high school free safety. But I think what happened was the week before, it was a UConn game, and I got in. Not because of injury, but then I made an interception in that first game. And then we go to Delaware, and Clint gets hurt right before halftime. I had another interception. And then the following game I actually started, had a third. So I had 3 interceptions 3 weeks straight. My freshman year, I ended up leading the team with interceptions. But it's hard not to play you if you're making plays. So I made the most out of every opportunity. And I was just fortunate to stay healthy for the time through that freshman year, because I did intend to run track my freshman year, but Coach Holtz wanted us to play spring ball, but in the third game, as a freshman, I hurt my shoulder at Yale. So we were in the Yale Bowl, I hurt my shoulder, and then 8 weeks later, I had to have shoulder surgery. So that's why I redshirted from track. I didn't even get to play spring ball as a freshman because of the injury. And then my sophomore year was Skip's last year. We didn't know it at the time, of course. But in the recruiting process, when Skip came to the house, and every kid and parents want to know, like, are you going to be there for 4 years? And he had gotten there, I think, a couple years earlier. And this is what he said, and it was totally understandable. He said, if I ever have the chance to coach with my father again, I would probably do it. Now, Lou had just taken a job with NBC or something, and he was getting older, so nobody thought he was going to coach again. So it wasn't until my sophomore year, which was 1998, it was the best season in school's history, even to this day. We're sitting in the hotel Friday night before the game against Georgia Southern, and Lou makes an announcement. I'm going to be coaching at South Carolina. And so I knew what that meant. And I don't know if everybody else asked Skip, hey, you're going to be here for 4 years or whatever else. But as soon as Lou announced that, I knew. And then we got absolutely crushed by Georgia Southern. And so that Sunday afternoon, the day after the game, Skip came in and just said, hey, I'm going to take the opportunity to go coach with my father. And so after having just a 10-3 season, we beat Hampton in the playoffs. First time UConn made the playoffs. It was our 100th year of playing football at UConn, so it was really significant. And even to think, 26 years later, it's still considered the best team in UConn history. That's where I look at, as I reflect back, I had so many opportunities that it just, the right place and the right time. Nothing about my talent level, it just, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, I guess.
Right.
And so that was, as a freshman, I think, to get in there and then build that confidence. By the time our sophomore year, I felt like I deserved and belonged there. So it was important to me, though, coming out of high school. And again, I think back, and it seems so audacious, that I wanted to start as a freshman at a Division I football school. But I think part of that attitude is also I didn't care how silly it sounded. Like, I had ambitions, and I was willing to put in the work to get the results.
Right. Do you did you end up finishing all as a football player there, or what happened?
No. So, and interestingly enough, my visit to Kentucky was not the last time I was there. I actually got to play my last game at Kentucky. It was our second game of the season. We started my junior year. We had Randy Edsel come in as the new coach, and we opened at Hofstra.
Okay.
And so we played against Giovanni Carmazzi, who was actually drafted ahead of Tom Brady, if I'm not mistaken, from Hofstra. And then that second week, we went down to Kentucky. And then after Kentucky, I was in that locker room at Kentucky. We lost, and I went up to the wide receiver coach at the time because I'd go out and work out pregame with all the receivers. I wanted to get as much work in as possible, and we had just graduated a bunch of receivers the year before. And so after that game, in my frustration, I wasn't playing DB as much as I would have wanted to. So I went to the wide receiver coach and said, "Hey, coach, any chance I can move to the other side of the ball and play receiver?" And at the time, that coach was Darrell Bevel, who was coach for the Seattle Seahawks, won some Super Bowl. So he knows what he's talking about. But on Monday, our day off, I get called in. Sunday, Randy says, "I want to meet with you on Monday." And so I'm thinking, sweet, like I might be going to the other side of the ball playing receiver. And he brings me in. He's like, "So you think you're a better coach than me?" And I knew this was not good. And so that's where he's like, "Are you questioning my coach?" I said, "Coach, I just want playing time." And so the meeting ended not very well for me, at least. And so that next Tuesday's practice, we're on kickoff return, and I was returning kicks with Jordan Younger, who's the offensive coordinator, just coached in the CFL, the Grey Cup. So great game, great mind. He got the ball, so I go up to return, and a guy just blew me up. And that ended up being my 8th concussion.
Wow.
I had 5 in high school. That was my 3rd in college. And it's like,
that was it.
You're done. You're done. So after the Kentucky game, that following Tuesday was my last practice. And then, of course, they ran all the studies. And this is back in the 90s. So I had to have my local doctor, Dr. Duncombe, write a letter to the university so that I could maintain my full scholarship and say that, yes, with his head trauma of 8 concussions, he should not play anymore. And I wore a pro cap from my junior year of high school all the way through college. I wore it in the Big 33, and now they're wearing these Guardian caps, which is somewhat comical. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's what prolonged my career, and then I also question, was it good that it prolonged my career with the head trauma and things? So.
So you finish up with track, right? And
so I finished with track. So that was the other nice thing. And Randy was at least willing to, if you get injured and you're on scholarship, you got to go in and work the office, mailers, recruiting letters, whatever it is. But because I had already been performing for the track team my sophomore year after our '98 season, they let me run indoor track, but I couldn't run outdoor track because they wanted me to play spring ball. So then I played spring ball that sophomore year, but I ran track indoors, and I ended up my first race. I actually set the school record in the 55. They didn't know what to expect from me, and then I went over and set the school record in the pole vault, after redshirting as a freshman. So it was kind of like, hey, this guy's redshirting, he's a football player, so who knows if he's going to do anything. And then I came in and did that. So my junior year, after that concussion in the fall, the coaches are like, hey, if track's responsible for you, we'll leave you on football scholarship and let you focus on track. And so that's where I did that. I finished 2nd in the 60-meter dash in the Big East Finals my junior year. And then my senior year is when I won the 60 and I won the pole vault. And that day in the Big East Finals, both of those ended up being school records as well. So at least I was able to back up my thoughts that yes, I can contribute to the team
Right.
to the point where it set school records in both events. So
Right.
it made me feel like, yes, once again, I deserve to be here, I belong, and again, it was through work ethic and then just the fact that there hadn't been any great sprinters or great pole vaulters at the
Right.
school, because now the school records are like 17 some feet in the pole vault, maybe even 18, and then the sprint record I think was beat 6 or 7 years ago.
So I've seen the race you post with some of the guys that went on to
Yeah.
the pros, and you won the race, correct?
I did, yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so, and it's interesting because it actually goes back to my junior year. That was my senior year in '01. But in 2000, and it was again at the Big East, up the Carrier Dome. And so we were in the 60-meter prelims. And so I ran against Clinton Portis was in my heat. So I ended up running a 6.80. He ran a 6.83, finished second, which got us both into the finals. So Sunday morning of the Big East finals, we show up and there's 8 lanes on the track. And you can only have 4 guys per team,
Right.
Maybe 3. None of the Miami guys were there. Santana wasn't there. Clinton Portis wasn't there. I think it was Daryl Jones was the other. So we're all like, where are they at? So come to find out, they went out Saturday night in Syracuse. And so the coach suspended them from competing in the finals. And
Right.
Santana had set a 6.78 Big East record in those prelims. So it's just 4 of us on the track that day, and I finished second behind a kid from Notre Dame. But that year, I was really focused on like getting super aggressive, really pumped up before the race.
Right.
And then going into my senior year, I focused more on understanding the mentality, and that focus, not only the focus, but the relaxation is better for high performance. So now we're going into my senior year. I had finished second in the Big East 60 that year, and so I was seated a little bit better. And that's when Willis McGahee was a freshman, Philip Buchanan was another speedster, and Santana was done with track. So I knew that I had the chance to perform. Andre Johnson was another one that was in the sprints.
Right.
So we go into Sunday's finals, and I was in lane 5, which is why my license plate reads lane 5. And a lot of people, you have 6-lane tracks in high school, so it's like lane 5 is not the fastest, but on a 9-lane track it is. And so I was in lane 5, and I had Buchanan to my left, McGahee was to my right. Jonathan Ordway was another guy that played pro. He was at Boston College. And then Antonio Brown. Now, it's not Antonio Brown. I think he went to Central Michigan, the Steelers dude, right? This is Antonio Brown from West Virginia, he could fly. And anybody that went to West Virginia knows he could fly. So these guys are all in the finals, and I'm sure I wasn't expected to win. I had a top time. But I knew to just relax and get out and perform, and my blocks were what were my strong point. So, and I forgot for 6 or 7 years that we had even recorded it on a camcorder. So I didn't know I had
the
video evidence of it until years later, because my buddy had a camcorder. But it was just something where I knew that I was not expected to win, and so I took the pressure off of myself in that regard and just wanted to relax and perform. And if you watch the video, like sprinters run right through and they bang into the pads. Well, I had shoulder problems, and I still had a pole vault. So I ran and I run the turn. So I kind of cut off McGahee's. And I don't look like I knew what I was doing because I was a pole vaulter that was just fast enough to sprint. Whereas a lot of those guys used it for their football training or whatever else. So I think that's where, again, by the time I found the video, now McGahee's Rookie of the Year, whatever else. So now you're like, oh my goodness, that's right, I beat all these guys, and now I have video evidence. So it's not like I'm just saying I beat them. There's the eye in the sky does not lie. So and then a couple 20 minutes later, I went over and competed in the pole vault, and because of the way misses and all that works out, I was the only athlete over 16 feet 3 inches, which at the time was a school record for UConn, and it won another Big East title for 20 points out of me. So yeah, track and field is near and dear to my heart. And again, I think when you talk to kids about performance and periodization as far as peaking at the right time, I mean, the fact that I set personal best and school records in the Big East finals, that's where I'd want to do it, So I give credit to my coaches and all these guys that help prepare you for those opportunities, and that's where I had so many doors open for me that I knew, hey, this is rare. Like, you have old heads coming back talking to you about, hey, this is going to run out, just make the most of it. I did that. Like, I'd hear those stories, and so I just made the most every day in high school, every day in college. And when the opportunity arose, I was in a position to step up, and thankfully I was able to do that.
Right. So in your lifetime, see, you beat LeVar Arrington in a race a couple times, right?
Yeah.
Willis McGahee.
Yeah.
Andre Johnson. How does that make you feel to know, like, maybe you didn't make it to the NFL, but what does that tell you about you?
Yeah, I think that was, especially being out because of concussions. And by the time, I was on 7 concussions before the 8th, I knew the league does so much in depth that there's no chance of playing. As much as that was a dream as a kid, and even wearing, the James Conner's jersey. I mean, he's a McDowell guy. Like, he gives kids the understanding that you can do it. Doesn't matter where you grew up, in a little town like Corey in Mill Creek, but if you put in the work and you get a team behind you, support team, family, that believe in you, the world is an oyster. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. So I think, I mean, it did solidify for me that, I had the talent, the ability. And it was, if I made the NFL, I don't think I would have been able to handle the potential money. I mean, there's so many factors to it, and then physically, what those guys go through. That's where I mean, James Conner is one of the most impressive individuals, just as an individual. But then when you look at his athletic accolades and what he's been through, I mean, that's just sheer determination. You see it when he runs. And so I think that, and again, it's that internal tenacity that you can't turn that down. You can't turn that off a lot of times. And so, I think that it was just that kind of justification that as much as I didn't get to play in the league, I got to compete against the guys that did. And then it kind of leaves that, well, what if? What if I was healthy? What if I didn't have head trauma? What if I knew how to manage it better? Because I at that Syracuse game yesterday, man, I love football so much. It's like any addict is like, stay away from certain things. Like, I know I can't coach football because the level of intensity ramps up so high, and most people, if you haven't played, you don't understand. And when I went down to watch the coach that recruited me, Nick Rapone, he's a defensive back coach for the Tampa Bay Bucks, won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame down in Newcastle, so I went to watch his induction, and outside before he went to speak, I said, well, just give him some motivational conversations like you did us. And he's like, they'll never understand. And he's exactly right. If you haven't been in the trenches or been through that, you really can't comprehend the mentality that it requires, and just that the general public just won't understand. They might be big fans, but what it takes to play and compete at that level, it's for very few.
So a couple more questions for you. Your EPA Hall of Fame, I know you got inducted to that. What does that mean to you?
So it means a lot, because when you think about all the local legends that are in there, I mean, even some of the guys that I went in with, I know Jimmy Del Sandro. I think, and growing up in such a small town like Corey, and Corey had some stud athletes as well in its day, I think that recognition kind of re-solidifies that hard work, and effort that you gave to be recognized in that. And I think that's where, even as athletes, that's not what you aspire to accomplish. You want to win. And I think what happens is those accolades tend to come if you've put in that work, and if you've been fortunate to be successful. But in Erie, PA, knowing the list of incredible athletes, it's a huge accomplishment for people to recognize that. And so, I certainly appreciate it. I'm humbled by it, because, again, I think I just wanted to put that work in and have some fun in sports like everybody else. But there were unique circumstances that great coaches and great opportunities that enabled me to be justified to be in there.
So once again, everybody, this was Laban Marsh. He's a McDowell track and football legend, also football legend at University of UConn. Thanks for having him today. This was Unsung Gridiron Legends. Laban, is there anything else you want to share before we leave today?
Well, I want to thank you because I appreciate, I know it's not easy putting groups together like this, keeping the content going and everything else, but it's fantastic to hear people's story. And again, in Erie, I think it's such a great place to grow up in and to compete. We've got so many great athletes in the area. Again, not everybody gets to go on and play at the most elite levels, but even some of your questions, like who are the best guys you played with, it's so unfortunate because whether it's injuries or just circumstances that impeded them from really getting to show out, I feel so grateful for the opportunity, to be recognized. And again, I appreciate all you do. So thank you for the entire group as we keep growing it. And I like to tag different guys, and if they're not in, be a part of this because, reflecting on these memories, it's just a great way to network and hopefully, help feed these kids. Like I try to make contacts with coaches that I know just to get eyeballs on some of our local athletes and try to be a resource for the kids because I had some great leadership and coaches that were doing that for me. So I just want to give back, but I want to thank you for trying to, again, spread that word of the unsung gridiron heroes. That's great. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Laban.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, brother.